What's the most disturbing thing you learned about someone in the first date? I matched with this guy and couldn't go out for a few days, so we chatted on the phone and really hit it off. We set up a date for the weekend. He picked the place. We lived in neighboring cities, so we met in the middle, which took about 30 to 45 minutes for both of us. He said it would be a nice place, so I made sure to dress up cute. I arrived and expected to be going to a cute, dressy-ish restaurant, and I had dolled myself up. Finally, I found the restaurant and thought I must be lost or at the wrong place because this is not what I thought when he said a nice seafood restaurant. It's like bingo night inside. Both the place and the diners are old. I'm talking 65 plus exclusively, and it is shabby and nothing special. So I texted him, thinking I must have been in the wrong place. Nope, this is it. So things aren't off to a great start. We're the only young people. It's weird and clearly not any kind of date place. I'm a little thrown because we'd been talking and had clearly stated that it was a classy place and told me to dress up. We sat down, ordered, and started chatting. I was already thinking things were a little suspicious, but I was trying to keep an open mind. I asked him how he was doing and tried to ease into things with a bit of small talk. He started complaining instantly, like full-on whining, and things went from weird to uncomfortable fast. He was upset about stuff at work and venting like crazy. Not a great first date impression. Like, dude, I don't know you yet. Maybe keep things a little lighter in the beginning. And then things went south even faster. He started telling me that he thought that all these women who like to cry wolf are just a bunch of liars. I was sitting there frozen, thinking, don't move and he won't see you. I mean, he worked in Jurassic Park. And he continued to explain exactly what he meant. I can assure you I didn't ask. How he thought they were attention seekers, they were all lying, they're making it up, and they really actually wanted it. Meanwhile, I'm giving clear, what the hell are you talking about signals. Like, boy, do you think you're getting a girlfriend with those nonsense thoughts? I am silently plotting out how to escape from this situation, and have driven out of my way to see him. Wrong move, obviously. I stayed calm and sat there as still and silent as I could because I did not want to set this man off. He clearly had some messed up beliefs. I was legitimately scared of this dude. We were wrapping up dinner when it all went down, so I knew that my time in a public restaurant was quickly running out. I wasn't parked far from the outside restaurant, so I decided rather than upsetting him by rushing out, I'd bide my time and leave in a few moments. I've always found it better to not upset or reject men you're afraid of until you're far, far away, and well out of their reach, and even then, it's risky. We got up to leave, and I told him thanks, and I hope he had a safe drive back. He wanted to walk me to my car, because, he's such a gentleman. I told him no, so we're going in opposite directions, and my car is right there. I'm good. Thankfully, he let me go, and I got in and locked my car doors. As I drove back, I was still absolutely stunned by the audacity of this man. He's a cop who works in the forcible crimes unit, and he thinks all women who come in are liars. When I told you I was afraid of him and did not want to upset him because he could look up my address, I'm not kidding. I dodged a bullet with that one. I didn't date for a little while after that. Dodged a bullet. Story 2. 3 years ago when I graduated, I was super depressed and went on medication. The side effect of this was that I didn't have much of a drive, so I think it messed up my picker, if you know what I mean. Let's just say I was accepting dates from guys I wouldn't usually go out with. I worked in an office that was in a building shared with many other different businesses. For the most part, all of them were established and had been in the building, along with the company I worked for many years. But this one office down the hall from ours was always changing hands. About every 6 months, the tenants would change. The current business would move out and another one would move in a few weeks later. During one of these transitions, there was a guy who would make eyes with me through the window as he was coming and going to that office. I thought it was cute because I would feel he was looking at me. But when I looked, he would quickly look away and kind of smile a little, and then look back with this look like, oops, I got caught. It wasn't my usual type, but this little routine was adorable to me. It went on like that for a few weeks, but he never took it further, and it got me curious about him. One day I decided it would be nice if I reciprocated, so I walked down the hall to find him through their office window, and unfortunately, the paper was still up on the windows because they were still doing a little construction. I started to walk back and he opened the door and saw me. It was kind of awkward, but we giggled a bit, and then he asked me out that night for a date, and I accepted. I lived out of town a bit, so we decided to just meet after work and walk through the park to downtown to grab a bite. I was excited all day. While walking through the park, he was still pretty shy with me, but was actually really talkative towards others. He seemed to know a lot of people and said hello a lot. Many people waved and looked up to say hi. We got downtown and the same thing kept happening. I noticed that many of these people were kind of weird. Like they looked homeless or really rough around the edges, but the thing is, I'm not a judgmental person and I thought it was great that he wasn't either. I realized I didn't really know what his business was, and it got me wondering if maybe he was a counselor or something. We got to a pizza place and stopped outside. He looked me right in the eye and said, "Thank you so much. Like, really, this is so nice." He kind of started it out and it was so sweet. I was super flattered that he was thanking me for going out with him. We went inside and it was one of those places you order at the counter. I was picking out my slice when the guy behind the counter started yelling at us to get out. I was so confused. He was saying, "Get the hell out of here. You know you aren't allowed in here." I started to realize he was talking to my date, and he didn't look surprised. He answered, "No, she's buying me a slice. I'm not stealing it." I was mortified. I asked what was going on, and the pizza guy said, "This guy's homeless and comes in here and grabs pizza slices when I'm not looking and runs away." I looked at my date and it all came together in my head. He was squatting at the office. He was saying hello to all the homeless people because he knew them from the streets. He had thought our conversations in the hallway was me offering to buy him food because he thought I knew he was homeless. I called my doctor the next day and got off that medication. Did you at least buy him that pizza? Story 3. There wasn't really anything disturbing about the person, but there was a disturbing event. I had been seeing this Marine for a while and asked him to come to a bar I was at to play pool. He rode his motorcycle over and we had a great night. When the bar closed, he wanted me to go to his place. I had my car, so I agreed to follow him while he rode his motorcycle. I hadn't much to drink and I felt sober, but I didn't question his sobriety, which was my mistake. As we were getting onto an on-ramp for the freeway, I saw sparks coming from under his bike. The next thing I knew, the bike bumped into a sign. Keep in mind it was pretty late, like 3 a.m. and pitch black. I just started screaming his name and looking for him, scared of what I might find. I had no clue where he could have gone, but I still searched with my phone flashlight, screaming his name over and over. After what felt like forever, he raised his arm up so I found him. He was actually lucky and pretty okay overall. However, the fear that I felt before I found him alive was excruciating. The adrenaline you feel as you're trying to look for someone who was just fine a minute ago and could be gone the next for all you know is scary. He ended up telling me that he had quite a bit of booze before arriving and again at the bar, so he wasn't really fine on the way home. It turned out he was crappy too and totally downplayed the fact that I was mentally scarred. I totally get that his experience was traumatic in that event as well. Maybe he had his life flash before his eyes. But when you witness that without knowing the outcome, it's a very dreadful experience. Story 4. Within the short time of waiting for a table at a restaurant, he shared with me that his dad had passed away. Once we were seated, he explained that he sometimes had trouble distinguishing between what was real and what he imagined during his manic episodes. Then he talked a lot about his family and how I could relate to them. He also explained how his dad passed away at a young age due to struggles with booze. On our way to the concert, he mentioned there was a toy sword in the trunk of his car. When we arrived at the concert venue, he playfully tried to convince the person in front of us to buy our tickets and almost got into trouble. Inside, he excitedly recounted a previous visit to the venue where someone he knew had fainted and an ambulance had to be called. He continued to share stories about his family, including personal details about his sister's romantic life and past relationships. I politely expressed that I wasn't interested in that topic. He then said, "I can't tell if you hate me," and I said, "Neither can I." He excused himself to the restroom and later revealed that he had given himself a pep talk in front of the mirror. At first I thought he was joking, but now I think he was serious. As the night went on, he had a few drinks and then blamed me, saying, "You made me drink," admitting that he hadn't had a drink since his birthday when he ended up in the hospital due to his manic episode. I decided to call an Uber and leave the concert early. Later that night, he texted me, expressing hurt feelings and claiming he's a nice person. He probably had another manic episode during your date. Story 5. I arrived at her house but couldn't go inside because she lived with her grandma and hadn't told me beforehand. She was ex-military and had 2 kids who weren't in her life, and she was still married. We decided to drive to a nearby park, and she got in my car with no shoes. We hung out at the park, and she told me she was a green witch. When I asked what that meant, she said she made potions and stuff. I asked if she could drink them, but she said no. I still had no idea what a green witch was. I'm pretty sure she had a Stone Cold Steve Austin shirt on too. There was no second date. A different lady catfished me hard, using pictures from before her substance use. I showed up to pick her up, and it was like an hour's drive. It was dark and I saw a figure on the side of the road. She got in my car and she wasn't as advertised. But I had already driven an hour, so I said, forget it. On the hour drive, she told me that because of her unhealthy habit, her kids were taken from her. I was desperately trying to think of reasons to turn around, but I didn't want to face that awkward drive back and maybe get hurt. We got back to my place and started chatting. She could clearly tell I wasn't into it. She suggested we go to my bedroom. I couldn't do it. We headed out, grabbed some chicken tenders, and I drove her back home at 3 a.m. Tinder in rural areas is wild. Story 6. They don't wash their hands after they go to the bathroom. Well, it is something I found through a series of unfortunate events. When he dropped me off at the end of the date, he asked me if he could use the restroom before heading home. But this time I was already not interested in him for a few different reasons and really didn't want him in my personal space, but he implied it might be an emergency, so I let him in. I have a small apartment, so I was in the living room waiting for him. The bathroom is located inside my bedroom, but the sink is separate from the toilet and shower area, which has a door to close when you need privacy. The sink is directly adjacent to this door, so some time went by and he ended up needing the bathroom for over 45 minutes. At that point, I actually felt bad for him, because I was like, okay, he really had a tough time, and that was really embarrassing. Finally, he emerged and walked directly after opening the door of the toilet area to me outside in the living room. completely skipping the hand washing. You can imagine the surprise on my face, and then he proceeded to try to give me a hug. I pushed him away and basically escorted him out. Well, that was one crappy encounter. These stories are hella unsettling, but honestly, quite entertaining. Since you're already halfway through, hit the like button if you're enjoying the content and subscribe so you won't miss out on more of these shocking tales. Story 7. I didn't mind that the man had forgotten his wallet. Everyone's allowed to have one of those days. After dinner, he asked me if he could stop by Target because he'd forgotten to get his mother a birthday gift. We walked through Target, and he chose some kind of lounge chair, which was around $30. He said he'd pay me back, and I had no problem with that. The problem occurred when we went to pay. A bag of M&Ms had broken and spilled on the conveyor belt and the floor underneath it. My date got really excited and started picking up M&Ms off the conveyor belt and eating them. I was horrified. I always knew I was a bit of a clean freak, but it immediately skyrocketed. I told him that I would happily buy him a bag of M&Ms for himself, so he wouldn't have to eat the fallen ones. He couldn't understand why I thought it was gross. Thankfully, he didn't attempt to go near me, which was my biggest fear from that moment forward. We never had a second date, and I never heard from him again, which I was glad about. Story 8. The date was going really well until the mood shifted to being a little more inviting, and she said, "So, what do you do to relax?" I'm pretty sure I saw where it was going and might end up with an invite back to her place, but I wasn't totally sure, so I played it neutral and said, "I read with a glass of whiskey." She then told me she takes baths with her socks on. I laughed and realized she wasn't laughing. She was so deeply offended that I laughed and I was like, "Okay, you're serious." And she said she was. I tried to be understanding, everyone has their thing, but she was too offended. When she asked how I could judge her for liking something, I told her it was surprising to me because probably the only thing I like worse than wet socks is wet jeans. She went over the top, including spilling a drink on me and leaving. I get that everyone has their thing, but I think you also have to understand when your thing could be considered weird. If she'd even said, "Look, I know it sounds weird, but I really like," then I wouldn't have even judged her much. There's self-awareness in that. But I'm now convinced she's a psycho. Story 9. I went on a first date, had a great time, and took her home. She never answered her texts after that point. I naturally assumed that she wasn't that into me and moved on with life. 2 weeks later, I get a call from her from the psych ward of a local hospital, where she had been put on involuntary hold. As the story unfolded, she had severe money problems and had been feeling depressed. However, she was still on dating apps and decided that she'd like to go out, having one last night of fun with somebody she didn't know. She took some pills, and luckily for her, her daughter responded to her not answering her phone that night by sending police on a well check, where they found her passed out. After telling me all this and how she didn't care how it would affect her daughter or this first date, she said she was now all better, had seen the error of her ways, and asked if I wanted to have another date. I noped so hard. Story 10. I had been talking to this guy for a while, and we had met in person at lunchtime but didn't actually have a date. So we finally went on a date, and it was a really great date. We went back to his house and were hanging out and getting close. He suddenly told me in a casual way that he was married, but they were trying out a separation. He went on to explain that she was on a date with a woman and would be home soon. He just wanted to give me a heads up so it wouldn't be weird. She came home about 20 minutes later, as I was trying to politely make my getaway. She was very nice but wanted to get to know me so we could be friends, and I was stuck there for at least an hour trying not to be rude. I don't have an issue with people being poly, and years later I was actually in one myself. However, I had less than zero desire to be involved in whatever they had going on. I could just tell that it was going to turn into a dumpster fire. Story 11. All these I learned on the same date. Number 1, I resembled his mom a lot when she was younger. Number 2, I acted and had nearly the same personality as his sister. Number 3, I was mistaken about not liking the food he had prepared for the picnic in the park. It was a dish meant to be hot but served cold. It wasn't great and had alterations from the usual recipe to his family's tradition, which made it even worse. Number 4, he didn't want the date to end and tried to refuse to drive me back to my car. I texted my cousin and had her call me in a panic, which I put on speakerphone so he would take me back. No matter how well I knew a guy, I never got in their car without sending a photo of the license plate and letting someone know when they should expect to hear from me because it scared me so much. Honestly, there was probably more during the day that I just don't remember. I never let someone talk me into going on a day out with a nice guy after. Story 12. 3 very casual meetings for coffee dates while getting to know one another. He threw out the question, "What's something about you that no one would suspect or guess?" I answered and asked him to do the same. He very quickly and nonchalantly said, "I have 4 kids, technically 6. I don't have custody or visitations with any of them. I miss them sometimes." He had the state step in and take all of his kids while he was with 2 different women. He considered the 2 kids taken into state custody not really his kids anymore because he didn't have any chance of seeing them. His parents had taken in the other 4 kids, relocated, and made no contact. He was holding out hope that he would see them again. When pressed about why he lost custody along with his exes, he said, "Some people can't mind their own business and think they should tell you how to love your kids. My kids and I had very special connections." I read between the lines and bolted. Story 13. I went on a walk with a neighbor I was friendly with but didn't know well. 5 minutes in, I found out he had given away a dog to the local shelter I worked at, so I was kind of done with him then. I stayed to finish the drink I'd paid for, but I didn't really talk much. On the way home, we walked. He kept trying to hold my hand and wouldn't take no for an answer. I ended up locking my elbow and holding him at arm's length the whole way home. When we got to our building, he kept asking to come in. I told him no. He wanted to give me a hug. I said no. He hugged me anyway. I went inside, locked the door, and turned out all the lights. He knocked on my door for probably 20 minutes while repeatedly calling and texting me. Dude, these people are just looking to date and they had it rough. I guess it's better to just chalk it up to experience, right? For more first date turnoffs, check out What Stopped You from Going Out on a Second Date with Someone next. Story 2 is just weird. See you there.